Our sole mission is to protect powerful magical objects from getting in the hands of evil men.
Grant from Screen Rant, excited to be here again with Dean Devlin for the Librarians next chapter. How you doing today, Dean?
Good to see you, Grant.
Good to see you as well. And I got to say, I've only seen the pilot, but I am so thrilled by the direction that you and John have taken the show with the next chapter. I find it interesting, though, because obviously we have Jacob back, but unlike your guys' work on Leverage Redemption, you're sort of going with an entirely new roster of characters in this show. I'd love to hear sort of what the decision-making process was like between the two of you to, instead of making a sequel for Stone and everybody else, to have it be a new set of characters.
Well, I think we've learned from things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe or what they're doing with Star Wars that, sometimes you can tell a lot of different stories that all exist in the same place. And John and I got really excited about thinking of what other stories could happen. In the movies, we met the library. But in the original series, we discovered that there was an annex up in Portland, Oregon. And we started thinking about, well, where else have there been annexes? Where are there annexes now? What adventures happened at those annexes? So we started with an annex in Belgrade, Serbia in 1847. And we said, well, who was the librarian then? And why was there an annex there? And that began a whole brand new story. So for us, it's really fun to expand the universe of the library. But also, in our mind, the original show is still going on. In other words, those adventures are still happening.
So I'd love to hear then, because you mentioned the annex, and that was one thing I found really intriguing, was watching the tethering process of the annex back to the Serbian location. How much is that going to maybe impact or cross over the two teams, given that they both now have sort of an anchor point to the library in two different places?
Jacob Stone has been the one who's allowed them to have this 6 months to try and clean up the mess they made. But it is tethered to the library. So there is things you'll see over the course of the season where the paths of the two shows collide.
Well, I can't wait. I'm hoping for another Cal appearance. I've loved Cal since the original films. Now, in looking at the new cast of characters, obviously we want to talk about Vikram because he has sort of that charming adventurer like Flynn, but also he has sort of a more rash side to him in terms of using the magic and everything. What can you tell me about sort of how his experience with the modern day, being a fish out of water, is going to really impact his, vision of what a librarian means to be?
Well, I think where he shares DNA with the Flynn Carson character is that Flynn had spent his life in academia. He had 27 degrees. He was in his 30s and he still hadn't left college yet. And then when he started in the library, he was suddenly experiencing the world for the first time, a world he'd only read about in books. So he literally was a fish out of water. Well, Vikram was a librarian in 1847 who suddenly finds himself here today, and he couldn't be more of a fish out of water. And that's where they're similar. Where they're different is Vikram has a very healthy ego, or maybe not so healthy ego. And he's known as, or he refers to himself as the naughty librarian, because he does things librarians aren't supposed to do, namely using magic. So he's wildly different than Flynn Carson in that regard.
I'm really curious to see how that plays out, because as we saw from the premiere, I mean, it's a dangerous thing using that magic incorrectly. Now, another character I'd love to talk about is Charlie, because it's interesting to learn that not only is there a secondary guardian in this world, but also that she was previously let go from the library. And so I'd love to hear, how much of this season we're going to see that backstory versus maybe how much of that is going to be saved for the already confirmed season 2 and beyond.
One of the stories that we try to tell over the course of this season is that in the other story of the Librarians, the original show, that at some point they decided that each one of them should have their own guardian. And so they brought in several to be auditioned for the part. And Charlie didn't get the job. But while she was basically auditioning for it, she fell in love with the library and really felt that this was where she was meant to be. So in the pilot, Stone gives her a second chance, and she doesn't want to blow her shot. So she's a bit overzealous in being a guardian this season to try and get the job she didn't get before, and try to figure out why she didn't get it before.
I love that. That feels like a really fresh approach to the Guardian compared to Eve, where she's just thrown in and trying to figure it out along the way. Now, talking about fresh approaches to characters as well, I love Lisa already because she feels, obviously, like we've been saying, shares DNA with Cassie in terms of her similar skill set, but she's coming at it from a skeptic standpoint instead of like everybody else just embracing the world of magic. What is that like for you and John, starting from that perspective of a character, especially someone who is a librarian compared to, again, like Eve, where she maybe started as a skeptic but quickly embraced the world of magic?
Well, we looked at this season as if you had a librarian from 1847 here today, there's huge gaps in his knowledge base. One of it being technology and just understanding a world that's completely different when it comes to tech. So she fills that gap for him. But as a character, what I find interesting about Liza is that when her parents were killed in a car accident, and she was a teen at the time, rather than going down the rabbit hole of remorse and regret, she focused entirely on the future. She became singularly focused in creating technology to predict what could happen in the future so that it could prevent something like the car accident that killed her family. But she hasn't looked backwards at all. The library is a place that houses the information of the past. And so she's found herself in a place that's really contradictory to who she is as a person at the moment that she comes here.
I really do love how, again, across the original film and the original series, how much the library unlocks a new personality, a new life for all these characters. And I can't wait to see more. Now, one thing I did want to ask about as well, much like Redemption, I mean, this show jumped networks, went from CW to back to your home of TNT for this franchise. I'd love to hear, not only about making that jump back, but also maybe how that changed yours and John's overall plan for the show.
Well, I mean, it's so strange to say this out loud because it ages me, but we started this adventure with TNT just over 20 years ago when we did the first Librarian movie. And when this version of the show came about, it came about at CW right after they had changed their identity, and they'd been bought by Nexstar. And they were terrific partners, and we started making the show together. But along the way, I got a call from a man named Sam Linsky, who works at TNT, who had been with the show from the very, very beginning, from the first movie. And he said, "Do you think there's any way you could possibly move the show from CW to us?" And I was like, I've never heard of that happening, but let me give it a try. And I have to say that the people at CW were absolutely remarkable when it came to it. They said, we get it. We understand why you'd want to move the show there. It makes sense. It's part of the branding of TNT. They said, let's see if we can make it happen. And they were incredible partners in helping us facilitate that move. And then we got to come back home.
I love that. And I love that you're back home because, again, hopefully that means, continued support for multiple seasons of Librarians past the two we already got on the way, which last time we spoke for Redemption, you mentioned that you had a busy summer ahead of you. So I'd love to know are you already cameras rolling on season 2, or is that in the near future?
We are halfway through shooting season 2, which is incredible. And in about 4 weeks, we start shooting season 3 of The Ark. So it's going to be a crazy year.
Wow, you are just chugging along. But I love that because, you keep delivering us great shows. So, why, I want you to keep working, which also I want to ask really quickly, any updates on Redemption season 4? I just spoke with Beth, and after her finale episode, I'm still eagerly waiting more.
We haven't heard yet. Amazon likes to get a lot of data. They usually wait until after the last show is aired, and then they want about 6 more months of data afterwards. I think on one hand, it's great that they don't have to rush. But on the other hand, it's tough because sometimes you go 2 years in between seasons. So we're hoping we get word one way or another sooner than later, but I anticipate it'll be a while.
Well, I'm going to also hope for sooner than later because, again, after seeing the arc that Parker has in that finale, I mean, I'm so curious to see where that takes her in the future. And hopefully that entices people to want to come back. Now, coming back to the Librarians, obviously a big question about the show's cast as well is Flynn ever going to come back? I know Noah's very busy with the Pit, and that also kind of impacted his Leverage Redemption season 3 schedule. So is there any hopeful talks with him about coming back?
Well, he is a producer on the show, so he's involved. But I think that he's holding out to actually be the librarian again in either a movie or if we get a chance to revive the original series. So I think he's holding out a little bit. But we will see some other faces from the original show.
I love that tease because yes, obviously I love seeing Christian everywhere, but definitely looking forward to the rest. So I'd love to hear about the casting for this new series as well before I let you go, because everybody does so well to bring their roles to life, and much like Christian and everybody else in the original show, that is a big part of loving these characters is the actors. What was it like that casting process?
It was incredible. It was incredible. Actually, the first person we cast was Bluey Robinson, who plays Connor. And one of our writers on our writing staff, who actually I had found from the show Doctor Who, he was a writer on Doctor Who, and he wrote on the original Librarians as well. He knew Bluey, and he said, "I think I've got the perfect guy for you." And as soon as we met him, we all just fell in love. And by the way, if you haven't seen, I recommend going on YouTube, searching his name, and see some of the videos of him singing, because they're incredible, absolutely incredible. But he was the first person we cast. Olivia was next. And she had done that movie RRR, which if you haven't seen it, she's phenomenal in it. Then Callum came around, and Callum is a guy who really earned the part, because I actually had my mind set on a different actor for the role. And it was the day of the final callbacks, and he showed up and he raised his game, and I was blown away. I was like, oh, that's our guy. And then we finished the cast off with Jessica Green, who had been the lead of another show I had done called The Outpost. Mm-hmm. And Jessica, who's marvelous. And like I said, we had a fantastic time doing the other series with her. But what people don't know is what she brings behind the scenes, what she brings off camera is equally, if not more important than what she brings on camera. I like to call her the sunshine, because every day she shows up with the most unbelievable attitude, and she raises everyone's spirits. Doing these shows are hard. You work in 14, 16 hours sometimes, not great conditions, and she always brings the sunshine. So I think she's a big part of the reason that this cast gelled so well together and really created this amazing family on set.
I love that. When you do have a lead like that who just brings that positivity, it really is like a trickle down effect to the rest of the production. And I think you've gathered an impressive ensemble for this. I can't wait to watch the rest of their adventures, and hopefully we'll get to chat again for more spoiler talks in the future. But Dean, always great chatting with you. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
Good to see you again. Take care.
We're the Librarians. Let's go save the world.